Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Sammy Roth.
And I'm Rosie Murphy. This is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
We are up to Season 2, Episode 16. It is The Whole Truth. It is a Sun episode.
This is where Jack implores Sun to tell the whole truth, and then she does not tell the whole truth.
I know, the episode title is a lie.
It's also the famous, home to the famous You Got Any Milk scene, which is convenient because we also have the final part of our interview with Michael Emerson.
Let's get to the whole truth and nothing but.
As you know, dear listeners, we start every episode with a hot take about the episode. Sammy, what's your hot take on the whole truth?
So I'm going to sneak in two sort of hot takes. One is just that Ana Lucia's line,
Jack and Locke are a little too busy worrying about Locke and Jack,
is an amazing line.
It is.
And I love that Ana Lucia says that. But my actual hot take is I feel out of a sense of fairness. I criticized Jack last season for forcing Sawyer to reveal in front of Kate that he had contracted an STD in the past. I thought that was a terrible breach of ethics for Jack as a doctor. And I feel like this episode I am now compelled, although Sawyer is not a doctor and did not take the same Hippocratic oath that Jack did, that it was just as bad and just as jerky of a thing for him to do to force Sun to reveal to him what the medical issue was that she was having, rather than just let her look through the supplies. That was bad.
Yeah. I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison because Sawyer is in possession of all of the medical supplies, and you could argue that Sawyer doesn't want her, like, rooting around in there because what if she just wants to find out what he has or whatever. But, yeah.
You could argue that, but that is not what's going on in Sawyer's head.
No, that's true. I'll allow it.
Thank you. Rosie, what is your hot take?
So I already alluded to this a bit in the intro, but I have some strong feelings about how Sun continues to lie to Jin about having had an affair, and she lies blatantly and to his face.
And to us, the viewers, by the way.
And to the viewers, even though we already know.
No, we don't know.
We don't know? Oh, we don't know. You're right.
No, we have no idea. We're supposed to think Sun did tell the whole truth.
Oh my gosh, that's right, because we don't know yet. We just think there was like a weird amount of sexual tension between her and her English teacher, who she also went on an arranged date with, but...
Correct.
I totally forgot that we didn't already know that. I feel like such an idiot.
No, you're not. I had to look it up on Lostpedia to check, because
Okay.
I was wondering the same thing.
I should have double-checked.
And this bleeds right into the episode conversation, because this is a Sun episode, but I do kind of... I mean, it's terrible that Sun doesn't tell the truth. I do kind of love the amount of subterfuge that goes on in, like, all of Jin and Sun's backstory reveal, like here and elsewhere in the show.
Absolutely.
I mean, you think back in Season 1 and they had the whole sort of seeing both sides of the scene of why does Jin come home with blood on his hands, where we're first led to believe that he's doing dirty work for Sun's father, and then we find out, oh, this was the first time, and oh, it wasn't him that... he didn't want it to go down that way, and it would have been much worse if he hadn't stepped in. But here first we think, oh, she must be having an affair with Jay Lee. Oh, no, he's just teaching her English. Oh,
right,
but,
because there's that, she slips the hotel key into the door, and there's that very subtle shot, and like, exactly.
You're right.
It's
totally designed to make you think that's what's going on.
Which does, in fact, turn out to be the case, but
not yet.
Right.
I think. But anyway, so you get that, and then, like, you find out Sun's infertile, but no, really, it's Jin that's infertile, and then you think, oh, like...
Absolutely.
But that must mean they do have an affair, and Jay Lee is the father. And then Sun says, no, they didn't have an affair, so you think it must be a miracle. And later
then
we
you
find
think,
out
well,
that
we've
they
already
really did
seen
have
miracles
an affair.
on this island, so that's totally valid.
Yep, you do. I just find it so interesting how the whole unspooling of Jin and Sun's backstories is just done in this fascinating... I'm sure it's intentional on the part of the writers that's just a thread that they have going with them, that they're never going to tell us exactly what's going on in a straightforward way.
You're so right. It's this constant bait and switch. Unspooling. I like that word.
Yeah. I wonder if it has to do with... or if it stems from, the fact that they don't speak English, or Jin doesn't, and there's always a little bit of a, sort of lost in translation effect, a gap between what the other characters understand about them and what's really going on with them. And I kind of wonder if it's supposed to have... They're trying to have that same effect on us as the audience, to sort of always keep us a little off guard, that we don't really know what's going on with Jin and Sun.
Yeah, well, and interestingly, in this episode, we get a moment where we're hearing things through Jin's ears.
Oh, yeah.
That part where Sawyer comes out and does the daddy-o thing on the beach. And then the camera angle shifts and we start to hear...
Så samväggar.
Right, very snow.
Ser man.
Oh, nice to shoot.
And we get like, maybe it's probably 20 seconds of the confusion Jin must be feeling all of the time. And that's what drives him to reconcile with Sun. Right? Because he goes
True.
to the garden and repairs it and gives her the whole speech of, I need you, I can't speak to anyone here. Which I don't love. I felt like it was, I don't know if it was supposed to be a romantic moment or not. It seemed like it was supposed to be. But the thing that led him to realize that, like, he needed to go ask Sun to forgive him and to apologize for this thing was, like, desperation of, like, you're the only person I've got on this island, so we better make it work. Which doesn't really seem, like, it's true, but doesn't really seem like a great place to start when you're apologizing for something.
No, and what he did was pretty shitty, so that's a fair point. So that's interesting because one of the things it makes me think of is the advice that that Jay Lee gives to Sun in the flashback is you can't run away from your problems. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of made me think that I don't think that he's necessarily right in this instance. It made me think that, you know, like when Sun had plans to abandon Jin at the airport before getting on the flight, like, that would have been totally reasonable. I mean, I definitely think there's something here that, like, you know, the power of Jin and Sun's love for each other and all of that somehow transcends everything and pulls them together through all of these obstacles we see. But it's, I mean, the point that what's tying Jin to her in this moment is desperation more than anything. It's just, I just think it's interesting in the context of realizing that they really do have these deep problems between them that have not been resolved, and that I don't think it was really a given that they were always going to end up together.
No, absolutely not.
I mean, I don't think that the strength of the love, like, it was I mean, it was not necessarily going to overcome all of these obstacles that have been put in front of them and that they've put in front of each other.
Yeah. There's a really interesting scene where Sun comes running out of the forest and she's feeling sick, and then Rose and Bernard walk up. And they're kind of having this old married couple, although I know they haven't been married that long, bickering session about how Bernard forgot Rose's birthday and he doesn't even know what day it is. And Sun, you know, they ask, should we go get Jin? And Sun says no, in this very panicked way. And it was just such an interesting contrast between the two married couples on the island, both of whom really haven't been together that long. But we see a super, super different level of maturity in those relationships. Like, we see with, I think, Bernard and Rose throughout that it's a small thing. They're able to let it go. They're able to forgive each other, even though they're kind of sniping about it. You know, it's a joke. It's not a big deal. Yeah. And then Bernard goes to look for a pearl to apologize to Rose for this comparatively dumb little thing, right? And then in contrast, you have Sun and Jin, who seem to have these, like, gargantuan problems, which just seem to be all the more intractable when you set them up against what seems like a very sort of stable and easy marriage by comparison, although things, of course, have not been easy for Bernard and Rose.
Right, but difficult for reasons that are more out of their control.
Right.
Yeah, it's I definitely think it's intentional that that's one of the subplots this episode.
Speaking of subplots, there are a lot of good subplots on this show. Do you have anything else you want to say about Sun and Jin, or?
I mean, it sounds like you want to move on to the subplots.
I mean, I just have so many thoughts. I mean, so we have two very important subplots going on in this episode. One is Ana Lucia and Sayid forming this tacit alliance, which I think is really, really interesting and reveals a lot about those two characters because, of course, Ana Lucia killed Shannon not a super long time ago. But we see, I mean, they do have an exchange where Ana Lucia says, like, you've got a good reason to hate me.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, here we are out on this quest. And Sayid says, you know, it wasn't you that killed Shannon. It was them. And he again, it's an example of, I think, what we were talking about recently with Sayid, of him kind of, his ability to, not that this would be petty, not that this would be a small grudge to hold against Ana Lucia, it would be a totally valid grudge, but even in this,
Absolutely.
this huge case, he's able to kind of step back and say, okay, I'm going to focus my energy on who I perceive to be the real enemy, which is, in this case, the others, the people who made you feel like you needed to defend your people, the people who attacked both you and us, and who it's understandable that you thought, Shannon was one of them, or like in such a short amount of time, he has been able to put this in context. It's absolutely remarkable.
Sayid's levels of maturity and rationality are like off the charts.
Yeah, almost
like
to the point that it's like,
superhuman.
are you even feeling grief? Which I'm sure he is, and just sort of processing it in his own Sayid way, which I think is channeling anger into figuring out if Henry Gale's telling the truth.
Yes. I mean, do you want to talk about Henry Gale? I assume that's where you were going with this.
Of course,
this
that's the
ultimately.
other one. Which is Locke and Jack in the Hatch,
Henry.
and their little breakfast with Henry.
There's this line at the beginning where he says, he's explaining why he won't draw the map, or telling Anna that there's no point in revealing his story or telling his story to her again, and he says something to the effect of,
Doesn't matter what I do. I'm dead already.
his attitude seems to, well, you're going to kill me regardless, and we sort of get the same thing out of him when he explains to Anna why he refuses to draw the map, because what if he draws it wrong? What if they have trouble finding it? They're going to assume it's because he's lying. They're going to kill him.
They're looking for an excuse.
And it just really makes me wonder, knowing that this is Benjamin Linus, and he always has a plan. What is his plan here? I mean, what does he see as his way out of this? Because it's interesting to me that he abstains for so long from drawing the map, which would seem to be the tailor-made way to get out of it, even though Sayid, of course, ends up digging up the body and ruins the lie. But if his plan isn't to just draw the map for them, what's his play? There must be something in his head here, and I don't know what it is.
So I'm just going to take some shots in the dark here. Why not? So I think the longer he stays in the hatch, the more he learns. Right? And I think there's some kind of, he's trying to optimize, like, gathering as much information as possible without getting killed. I think his gamble is that neither Locke nor Jack will kill him. I think he's playing them off against each other and is just really interested in learning as much as he can about the leadership struggle, but so far has seen that, Jack did not want him tortured. Locke has been kind of generous to him in certain moments. Like, I think he's putting a lot of faith in them and kind of their civility toward him, if not toward each other.
Interesting.
I think, they sent Sayid in. 3 days later, they sent Ana Lucia. I think he probably knew he was going to have to draw the map at some point and was just kind of biding his time.
I wonder if he was waiting until he found someone who he thought would really make a thorough effort to find it. I wonder if with Ana Lucia, she really did convince him she was the one who was going to check it out for real.
Maybe. Well, yeah, because she says, I thought I had one of the others and I was wrong.
Yeah.
Which maybe shows him that she's not so sure. She's not, like, so arrogant in her self-confidence that she's, she wants to be proven wrong here.
Right.
And I think you have a decent point there. Because even when they get to the clearing, Sayid says, it's not here, let's go back, this is nonsense. And she says, no, we need to look. And
we kind of see why he was hesitant then to draw the map.
Right.
Based on Sayid's reaction.
Right.
I think you have a fair point that, and you're right, I hadn't thought about it that way. I was sort of thinking about it as well. If he doesn't get out of there, eventually he's dead. But you're right. He probably has a pretty good. He probably has a pretty good reason to think that they would never actually kill him, and that eventually his people will get him out of there as they do, and that he won't have to worry that he's going to be dead by then.
Right. Because as far as he knows, and he knows a lot, right? because he has Ethan's intelligence and a few days worth of Goodwin's. He knows that Echo has killed people and that Ana Lucia has killed people. But Jack and Locke are the ones in charge here.
Yeah.
And they seem to run a pretty tight ship, except for their beefs with each other.
Yeah. It's amazing what Ben is willing to risk, though, to go in there. I mean, even if you think that he really, he thinks I'm smart enough, they're not going to kill me, I'll figure a way out of it, eventually. Like, my God, what he is willing to go through.
Yeah.
It's impressive.
Mm-hmm. And at the end, he finally gets to come out and see the hatch. He gets to eat some Dharma cereal. He gets to inquire about the computer.
We never find out if they give him milk.
No.
That's an unanswered question.
He gets to fuck with them a little bit more, just for fun.
That was pretty amazing at the
great.
end, how he's just doing the thing like, that whole... Actually, this is another thing. The whole speech at the end, the "you guys got any milk" speech, you said he gets to fuck with them. Like, I really wonder, is he doing that speech just for the purpose of fucking with them? Like, could there be any other reason why he would say those things?
Why else? I mean, what else could it be? Because there is no trap.
I don't know.
And he knows that because he planted the balloon. Speaking of just fucking with each other, I just want to give a shout out to when Jack comes out of the shower and Locke is shaving, and he says,
"Steam opens up my pores."
Which I think is low-key like one of the funniest lines in the show.
I had actually totally forgotten about it. It's quite good.
It's so good.
My gosh. Do you have any hindsights?
Just a nice moment of foreshadowing when Ana Lucia kind of slyly says to Sayid and Charlie, "At least we know we're on the right island." When they're going into the jungle and they see something familiar.
I totally didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, because eventually they will not be on the right island, or rather, Sawyer and Kate and Jack.
No,
will
and
not
they're
be on the right
gonna
island,
end up.
She's clearly,
being pretty stunned by that.
just kind of making a stupid joke. But yeah, so I think we should probably play the last part of our interview with Michael Emerson, and I'm very disappointed that it's the last part. But he did say he would come back sometime in the future.
He did. I think we could say he committed to that.
I think we can.
Yeah, you'll see. Let's play the tape.
You talked a lot just a moment ago about how Lost dealt with these huge metaphysical questions and really didn't shy away from the afterlife and purgatory, like all of these like questions about what it is to be human. Like, do you feel like there are other shows out there today that are doing that? And if so, what are they, and do you watch them?
I mean, I think there are so many shows now and I think there's a bunch of them that are thoughtful or philosophical or talking about real stuff. Rectify was kind of a beautiful show that way. Lots of shows that Damon and Carlton work on. Lots of shows that Jonah Nolan writes. I mean, Westworld is grappling with. Yeah. Of course, Jonah's obsession is, artificial intelligence, but within that narrative world, he and Lisa, they're really exploring some interesting territory, and playing with narrative forms like storytelling devices. That show is more fractured than Lost ever dreamt of being. In terms of backward, forward, sideways, and constantly springing new dimensions or new worlds on you. I like that. I mean, it's thought-provoking. It's not easy. It's not always easy to watch. But sometimes the not easy shows are good ones.
Mm-hmm. It does kind of seem to me like Lost laid the groundwork for a lot of that. I mean, the kind of, the stuff that you're talking about where it was able to be, so fractured and so convoluted and to get into such deep philosophical issues like, I don't know if you have that impression as someone who's worked in television, but it certainly seems to me like Lost laid the groundwork for a lot of what's come since.
I do think it was groundbreaking, and I think a lot of writers looked at it and said, "Oh wow, it doesn't always have to be straightforward narrative. We we're making it up as we go. Why not play with time and space as well? Not just character relationships or plot situations, but everything's a lot more abstract or fractured now, I think, which is good. Everything, and it lends, it makes watching the show also the solution of a puzzle, which is fun, I think, for me.
Yeah. Did your wife? I assume she kept watching after you got on the show.
Well, she was on it too.
Oh yeah, she played. I forgot. She played your mother in a flashback.
Yeah, she gave birth to me. It's a Freudian nightmare.
Okay, I've got to ask. How did that come about? Did they need to cast your mother, and you were like, oh, my wife can do that?
Carrie and I think we were at a party where other lost people were at, and we were joking around about, Carrie, you should be on the show. Somebody said it. Carrie, you should be on the show. She said, what would I play? What would I play? And she said, you're jumping around all over the place. Well, I should play your mother. And I think someone mentioned it in casual conversation to Damon or Carlton, and lo and behold, a few weeks later, I get a call saying, would you have a problem with your wife being on the show, playing your mother? Said, no, of course not. Of course, I never saw her because I wasn't in the scene.
Right.
They had a little baby.
My gosh. I was just going to ask if she enjoyed the show more or less after you joined the cast.
I think she enjoyed it about the same, but with an added degree of relish because I was on it, and plus the fact that she had worked on it and she now knew most of the actors.
Yeah.
So it was fun. It was like you're part of that lost family. It was cool though. I mean, being on that show was like a little bit. I mean, my life as a workaday actor, suddenly finding myself on an island in the middle of the great blue ocean, a strange place where unprecedented things were going to happen to me, was a kind of a parallel to the life of Benjamin Linus. In a way, I was living with mystery and disassociation and strangeness, newness. It was fun and funny that way. Also unsettling or disorienting. You go out in the middle of the Pacific, I always felt like you lose track of mainland time or mainland life, because when you get up in the morning, it's supper time in the USA. So that by the time it's late afternoon in Hawaii, all the world you know has gone to sleep. So you're the only ones up, working, eating, traveling.
Is there anything else that comes to your mind when, we've spent all this time talking about Ben Linus and about this time in your life? Anything that you're thinking about that you haven't thought about in a while, or anything that you think people don't know that they ought to know if they think back on this show?
Most of the things I have to offer now are reflections on that past set of events and how the lens shifts a little bit with time. What you think about a job, what you think about. You go back through pictures you have or old video clips or boxes of discs and things, and certain things come back to you. It can be a bit of a blur until you go back and dig in. It's a blur when you do it in a way. You just show up and act, and then you watch them, and you don't always, you don't always appreciate it fully at the time, or maybe ever. But I'm always aware that there are many people out there that know far more about it than I. People can quote me lines and quote me the name of the episode they're from and how the scene was set up and things like that. It's so interesting that people's passion for a show like that.
Yeah, I'm curious, how do you feel about that? I mean, you mentioned people coming up to you on the street or tapping you on the shoulder on the airplane, but to have been a part of something that is so deeply held by so many people, and I'm sure this has been the case in other parts of your work too. I mean, sort of personally, as an artist or as an actor, how do you reckon with kind of the weight of the things you're creating?
Well, if it reaches people, it's a wonder, you know. And if people feel strongly enough about it to come up and talk to you on the street, that just seems like a fine thing. I mean, sometimes people are aggressive or what have you, or odd, but generally speaking, I think that's a sweet experience, and I think it's part of your duty. I think if you've been on a show that was a success for you, a successful show and a meaningful show for others, the viewers, why not say that show was the beginning of a conversation, or the beginning of a thing that gets digested and thought about, like a good book, maybe. I mean, you would hope that you were on a show that had that kind of power.
Yeah.
That's a nice thing.
Yeah.
And as I said, it never stops. I think in 20 years, people's grandchildren will be stopping me on the street. I don't know how they're going to recognize me, but...
Yeah. All right. Well, we always like to give you a chance to plug anything you're working on now. So, what are you working on now?
I just finished. I'm excited about this project. I was 3 months in Rome shooting a mini-series. It's a remake of The Name of the Rose.
Wow.
Umberto Eco. I don't know if you know the work.
I know the book, yeah.
Yeah. I read that book when it first came out. I think it was 1980, 79 or 80, and I adored it. And to get to be in it, it's a murder mystery set in an abbey in the mountains of Italy in the 14th century. And a character, a Franciscan monk from Britain, William of Baskerville is his name, so you can see what the reference is.
Yeah.
He's a kind of genius of the natural sciences. And they bring him to this abbey to try to solve a series of colorful murders that are happening. Something to do with the library.
Very nice. And that's you. You're playing the friar.
I'm playing the abbot. Yeah, he runs.
Oh, okay.
John Turturro plays the detective guy, and a whole bunch of other wonderful actors. In this case, it'll be an 8-hour remake. They made a Hollywood movie in the 80s with Sean Connery and Christian Slater. But this, I think they'll be able to get more of the stuff into it. And to work in a foreign country with an all-foreign cast was really interesting and exciting. And I mean, it's so up my alley. I love to play a historical thing. I love a costume drama. I love rituals and mysteries and all of that stuff is in there. So it was a pretty great experience. It's an Italian-German production. They're cutting it now. I think they mean for it to be ready to air in Italy in next February. And I know that AMC's Sundance TV has bought it for broadcast in North America. So sometime in 2019. It's great. I mean, I hope it'll be great. I made some fairly extreme choices in the playing of it, so we'll see how it goes.
I'm excited to see that. You know, I got to say, I remember when Lost ended, and there was that project that was announced, and I forget what it was called, but it was supposed to be a project with you and Terry O'Quinn in the lead roles, and I remember being so excited about that, but I guess that one never happened, huh?
No, it went to... It was approved to be a project, and they attached writers to it and stuff. But there were regular TV writers, and the more they wrote on it, the less it was like the original idea. The idea was we were going to be two con men who were way past it.
Right.
Too old and slow to actually be doing any of this. The kind of guys that when you get hit, you fall down and you don't get back up because you're hurt too bad. So the whole idea was that we were losers. But the more they wrote on it, the more superpowers we had. We'd read scripts where we were kicking indoors and kicking asses. I thought, no, I can't do it. I don't have the strength to do it. So it never happened, and now we're both busy on other things. But I keep in touch with him. He's on this new Stephen King thing, Castle Rock.
Oh yeah,
he's on that, and but also Patriot, if that's still going. He was really good on that.
Castle Rock is on my list of things to watch, partly because Terry's in it. But no, that sounds like a really interesting show.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it yet.
And
we're having people over tonight to watch. My wife is on a show called Claws on TNT, so we have people over on Sunday nights to watch her episodes. It's fun.
Very nice.
What is Claws about?
Claws it's 5 women that work in a down and out nail salon in a little town on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and they get mixed up with the Southern Mafia in a scheme involving prescription drugs and money laundering, and they get in way over their heads. So the show is both funny, super raunchy, and super violent. It's cool.
Yeah. I was just gonna. Isn't your wife on the Good Fight also?
She recurs on that. She plays a wonderful zany character, Elsbeth Tassioni, the kooky, distracted lawyer who turns into a genius when she's in the courtroom.
Okay. I told a friend of mine, who has seen Lost, by the way. I'm talking to Michael Emerson, and her reaction was, "Oh my God, he's married to Carrie Preston, who's on the Good Fight. You have to ask about that." So not
I don't know where she came up with her character, because it's a really odd and difficult. She plays a character whose mind is working faster than the world around her, so she's constantly distracted by other things, sub themes. She gets derailed. It's all sidebars and observations that she's so scatterbrained. I guess she's on the spectrum somehow. But it serves her well. It's brilliantly written. It serves her well in the courtroom because her mind works so quickly.
I think, Rosie, did you anything else still on your list that we haven't gotten to?
Nothing for me. Any for you?
Well, I guess we didn't ask that question about the island. Would that be a good one to end on, maybe, or should we already move past that, do you think?
Oh, go for it.
Okay, Michael, I'll ask you one more Ben question, and then we'll let you go. I just, one very, lingering question that I always have about Ben after watching the end of the show is a question about his attachment to the island. He's willing to go down with the ship at the end. He decides he wants to stay and be Hugo's second in command. I'm so curious. I know looking back after a long time, but what do you think it was that made Ben so attached to that place? I think it's sort of an open question still.
Well, I suppose it's the only place he ever felt fully himself. I suppose it's the only place where, what if all the drama and power of your life took place in a mysterious and maybe unreal vortex between dimensions? Wouldn't you always want to make your way back to it? Or
that's a difficult hypothetical.
The island is meant to be real, but obviously it has some special features.
Yeah. I don't know. If I lived my life in a vortex, would I always want to go back to the vortex? That's a tough one.
It was like it was a land promised to him and then taken away.
Yeah.
That whole drama between him and Jacob, that's a big... Yeah. That's Old Testament.
Here's what we should do. If we'll get back in touch with you in about 2 or 3 years when we get to the Jacob part of the show, and maybe we can do this again and talk about the Bible.
Oh yeah. Oh, and we've got to talk about the judgment episode and.
Yeah. So we'll do a part 2.
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds great. Thanks so much for chatting with us, Michael. This has been real fun.
Mm-hmm.
Good. It was a pleasure for me too. Thanks.
I'm so glad.
So I think one of the things that I loved most about the conversation with Michael Emerson was just realizing what what intelligence and sort of depth of perception that he brought to the role of Ben Linus. Just hearing him talk so eloquently and so sharply about who this character was and how he was able to play him, and just his relationship, like what he said this episode, about how his experience as an actor working on this island, Hawaii, and sort of being disconnected from the rest of the world, how he felt that was similar to Ben's experience on the island. That's just the kind of insight, and lots of examples of that over the last 3 weeks of this interview, but just the kind of insight that I think you can really see why you needed an actor who brought that kind of sort of thinking aspect to the role, that you needed someone like that to play this character who is always plotting, always planning, such a great intellect. Made me appreciate the character in Michael Emerson all the more, and understand better how he was able to be so good.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I love when we were talking to him, he would just go down these paths where he was thinking about these things, not for the first time ever, but for the first time in a while, and would just kind of mull over what these things meant and it was just a real pleasure to see somebody turn those things over, even so many years after that role's finished. Very cool.
It is. What did he say last week about Lost was exploding out from its center?
Anyway, we are clearly still starstruck over here.
Michael, thanks for coming on with us. It means a lot.
Yes, we look forward to talking to you in a couple of years.
We do. So next week we've got Lockdown, which is an all-time great Lost episode.
We will be moving away again from our all-star cast members. We have an interview with another scholar of Lost, a man named Jason Nattell. He's a professor at Middlebury College who actually coined a term based on the way we all behaved the night that this episode premiered, in our kind of feverish time on the internet trying to figure out what that blast door map meant. So it's a really fun conversation and a lot of interesting insights.
As always, you should subscribe to The Hatch. We are on all the podcast apps, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you can find us. Subscribe, rate, and review us. It helps other people find the show.
You can come and chat and hang out with us at facebook.com/thehatchpodcast or on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast.
As always, our cover art is by Danny Roth, and our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen.
We'll be back next week.
Namaste.